Gurvinder, you're going to take some screenshots, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone. I don't want to lose on the time, so I'm starting bang on 5. And if I miss out any names, please forgive me. We will chat otherwise. But definitely a welcome to all my senior colleagues at ISTD. And more than that, I think I'm so privileged to have such wonderful panelists today with me. Dr. Ushi, Dr. Manjari, Madam Tulsi Bhatia, Dr. Moti Pattabhiraman, and the co-host is Gurvinder, so who is going to take care, and definitely Daniel G is there. So Daniel G, over to you.
Good evening, one and all. Friends, when I thought about this e-learning, first name came to my mind to discuss with is Dr. Rajeshwari. I talked to Dr. Rajeshwari and she came out with a very catchy theme as well as very good panelists today's webinar. I welcome all of our senior members, past presidents, President Emeritus, NC members, all other ISTD members, and all attendees to this webinar. Today, our national president is out of station. He will be joining us later. On his behalf, I welcome you all to this webinar. Our today's panelists are Dr. Ushi Mohandas, doctor and behavioral scientist. I welcome you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you
Ms.
so much.
Tulsi Bhatia, educationist. Madam, I welcome you. Dr. Moti P. Kripashankar, ophthalmologist. Sir, I welcome you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Manjari Deshpande Shenoy, child psychiatrist. Madam, I welcome you.
Thank you.
And all their detailed introduction will be done by Dr. Rajeshwari. Dr. Rajeshwari, over to you.
Thank you, Kuryanji, for the welcome note. And it's a proud privilege that when you said that you wanted to do this seminar on, rather webinar. So it was so nice that the topic we finalized bang on there, where everybody is struggling with the screen time and the mental and physical well-being associated with it. The new not are the names popping up everywhere. But at the same time, because it is kind of a webinar, you know, it is organizing so many webinars that, you know, hardly you find anything. Sometimes it is so much of repeat that really you find it hard to be connected, that whether this webinar is useful or not. So that was the entire idea, to look into a deeper perspective than just hosting a webinar. And that's why I thought that we will have, you know, one eye doctor, the ophthalmologist, one educationist, a seasoned educationist, and definitely two types of psychologists, or you know, one doctor who is a psychiatrist, child and adolescent psychiatrist, and Dr. Mohandas, who definitely brings the perspective of practice around the behavioral science. So this was the entire thought behind it. So touch screen or you touch heart. What is the implications of the e-learning? That's what the thought. Well, it's a proud privilege to welcome the panelists, and I would like to introduce one by one. So our speaker today, like, because I feel, you know, only one panelist is male, so I give the upper while introducing him. Um, so Dr. Moti Pattabhiraman Kripashankar, beautiful big name he has, and he also has, you know, a rich experience behind his entire work he has done. He has held many positions. He started his career down in South, and then, you know, many hospitals, he shifted, he experienced the various tastes in the ophthalmic department, and right from administration, a surgeon, to be a researcher, to a trainer or a teacher. So, it is very nice to know Dr. Moti in that way. And the very important thing is that he modified a surgical technology to increase clarity in vision, doing the cataract surgery. So that's a very important thing. And he also is a person who teaches, the memory magic to people. So that's a wonderful thing. Dr. Mo, welcome you. So I'm just taking your short name, not that full name. So I hope it's perfectly fine with you. My another panelist is
Thank you,
Manjari
ma'am.
Deshpande Chennai. She is a child psychiatrist and a counselor by her profession. And she has a number of clinics in and around Mumbai where she takes care of the needs of the children for their academic, behavioral, emotional, any kind of adjustment, psychological disturbance, which is a very important role you are playing, because in India we have been blessed to have so many psychiatrists around, but hardly people were not recognizing the need earlier. But now it is rampant, and I think you are doing wonderful service, Dr. Manjari. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Have I have Madam Tulsi Bhatia with me. She is a very good friend, though everyone here is. She has been a leader, educator with the very rich experience coming with Good Shepherd International School, Ooty. Everybody knows that Ooty is the hub for education, and she is well versed with all types of boards, ICC or maybe Cambridge, or take it CBSC. She has been an first who led the finishing school concept, and she has been grooming and training many corporate people, very many students, and large number of clientele. And particularly, what I believe is that uh, she has been a go-getter, because once she joined the Heritage International Girls School in Udaipur, it has within very short span of time, school has to an international pitching is entirely her hard work, committed teachers and the administrators. Welcome aboard, Tulsi ma'am. So very wonderful to have you here. We have very renowned Dr. Ushi Mohandas. What a beautiful, if I go on reading, go on and on and on, I read her CV or her resume or what her introduction. It is, she is an behavior scientist, she is a voice coach, she is a psychologist, she is, a media consultant, she is a tongue master, she is into music and healing, and I think she has touched more than 5 lakh lives around her profession and has 13 professions in hand, which is a huge, number of professions in her kitty. And she has won the national award for being the crusader for, for the doctor against corruption. And she is the one who motivates people. And she was, I have heard the movie like Student of the Year, but our Dr. Ushi has also won the award of Doctor of the Year. So, welcome, Dr. Ushi. I love you for your candidness, and we would wait to hear from you when your turn comes.
Okay,
So
thank you.
welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know that the when it comes to introducing the personalities like this, I get swept away. But coming back to our touch screen or touching heart. Definitely, it is, I would like to give some background about it. That, until December 2019, even I myself, we were driving something into IIMs and other B schools, wherever I have been associated, to reduce the screen time because that was causing a lot of disturbances to people. But come January 2020, the tables turned. The work from home scenario and the forced learning by webinar, those who haven't heard anything like Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, Google Circle, Google Classroom, Blue Jeans, or Microsoft Meet, or such kind of meeting apps, suddenly everybody started knowing, oh wow, this is like, I have been using Zoom ever since 2015. But when I introduced this concept to ISTD, everybody said, what is Zoom and why we need it? But see, the tables turn very fast. And also, like for 10 years or maybe from year 2000, I see that we have been beating around the bush of digital India. So digital India, Wi-Fi India, this thing, that thing. But now you see how everything has changed, that now it is truly digital India. Are we reaching out? Are we accessible to everyone? And then are we missing out because we are using everything work from home to the screen teaching to the online learning? Are we able to cope up with this new normal? This is what is going to be our focus today. And in this entire scenario, I would like first Dr. Manjari, who is the child psychiatrist. Maybe because there are so many parents here, so many trainers here who are using these apps to conduct their training and teaching. So maybe I would touch base from you, Dr. Manjari. The format is known to you that 5 to 7 minutes you will give your heart out on the title. Each of the speakers would be taking 5 to 7 minutes, and then we will come for the question answer. So go ahead, Dr. Manjari. We are eagerly waiting for your your wisdom to be shared by you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajeshwari, and thank you to all the members for taking up ISTD, for giving me the opportunity to be here. I think it's a very important topic, especially in today's times. Like you said, I think till last year, we were all talking about reducing screen time. Now, I'm a psychiatrist. I deal with children and adolescents in my clinic. So the most common complaint of parents or for what kids would come to me for counseling would be their increased screen use. So we were, helping them deal with this. And now suddenly from February, kids as young as 3, 4, over the last 1 week, we have got calls from some parents. Kids as young as 3 years are having online schooling. So I'll just narrate 3 examples to you from my recent experiences over the last 2 weeks. So technology effect is like Goldilocks effect. We've had the story when we were kids that Goldilocks had 3 bowls of porridge, and she tasted all 3 and she preferred the one which was neither too hot nor too cold. So it's basically anything in moderation is good, but technology is like that. We can't do with no technology, but excess of technology can also be very harmful for our brains. So recently, there was a parent of a 5-year-old who called me yesterday. Her child has something what we have called as mild autism. It's a developmental disorder. And basically, this child was very well settled in school because the child was undergoing regular therapies. So this child does well on a one-to-one interaction. Now, from coming Monday, their school has introduced online school. So the child is supposed to sit for 3 hours, even though the child is only 5 years old, and is expected to learn nursery rhymes, etc. online. So this parent's question to me was, should I just take a break for this whole year? Because I know my child will not sit. With autism, the child has hyperactivity. So there is no question of the child sitting for 3 hours. And also the child was used to us teaching in a multi-sensory approach. So when we teach kids, they basically use all their senses in learning. That's the way kids learn best. So she thought it's best to take a break from studies. Otherwise, the child is doing really well. So imagine, just because of online schooling for the next 3 months, the mother is actually considering to take a break. Then another child, a very bright 10th standard girl, parents are doctors, child is extremely bright, so they have online school now for 7 hours. Their regular school is online. So whenever the parents off late last week, they were monitoring her, and they found out that all her screens are open. She has multiple screens open. The teacher is teaching on one screen, she's minimized that screen, and the other screen she's playing games with her friends, she's chit-chatting with her friends. And when the parents have spoken to her over the last 1 month, because of school online, she's completely lost interest in. So her grades are, just going down by the day. These are the most common ones where the online teaching has an adverse effect. Now I have a 10-year-old with school refusal. School refusal is a condition in which they're scared to go to school. So that child is scared of social interaction, scared of the teacher, doesn't want to interact with her classmates, etc. We were doing therapy on her, working with her. Now, miraculously, because of online school, because she doesn't have to interact with the teacher face to face and doesn't have to actually interact with her classmates, this girl is doing really well in the lockdown period. Her anxiety has come down. She's so happy. I mean, when I spoke to her for a session, she was like, I would want this lockdown to go on forever. So this is one example of the many, but I think in general, most kids and most parents are burdened. I think parents are also a burden because if they have a young child, they have to monitor. Having online classes without the parent monitoring is not making any sense at all. So we have guidelines for screen use. I'll just take 2 minutes more. The guidelines say less than 2 years, no screen use at all for children except for video calling. This is guidelines by the Indian Academics and by American Psychiatric Association too. And between 2 to 5 years, only 1 hour screen per day. So, in today's times, are we really following these guidelines? If a 3-year-old child has 3 hours of online school, obviously because the parents are at home and the child is not going outdoors, they are also giving the screen for other uses. Why these guidelines were formed is, as a psychiatrist, we study the human brain very well, and we know that 90% of the brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. At that time, the brain is extremely plastic. That means it's like a sponge. It molds very well, and this is the sensitive area of age, the first 5 years, when environmental factors play the most important role in the development of the brain. Now, obviously, when you're introducing screens at lesser than 5 years of age, their brain development is obviously not going in the correct way. Numerous studies have said that language skills, concentration skills, and behavioral patterns, along with sleep, along with obviously the physical effects, there are multiple studies where kids exposed to screen at young ages have an effect on all this. So, are we really paying attention to this? So, recently I had a debate with a lot of parents also whether they really like online schools. The only advantage is kids are constructively engaged for a couple of hours. But again, then there are so many points that come along with it that the parent needs to be involved as well. A child with special needs just cannot do online schooling, etc. So here on one end, we as psychiatrists are, pushing parents to limit their screen use, pushing children to stay away from screens and prefer playing outside, study from textbooks, etc. But obviously, because of the lockdown and because of this whole concept of online learning, all that we've done over the last few years, I think, has gone for a toss. So again, that's why I said it's like the Goldilocks technology. We have to know how to balance it moderately. Only then it will, serve its real purpose. Otherwise, it's going to be detrimental for all our young children.
Great, Dr. Manjari. This was so insightful. The screen time, I think it was so beautifully captured by you that there are guidelines. Many people even do not know about that. There is an age-related guideline. I'll come back to you on that later. But I think let us hear something from Tulsi Bhatia. She is into education, and maybe she throws some light that what are their struggles and challenges about it. Tulsi, are you there?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear? Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Rajeshwari and ISTD for inviting me for this. It was very interesting to listen to Dr. Manjari. Now, I would like to interpret touching hearts in a different way, because I felt that this whole pandemic caught us, sorry for the unparliamentary phrase, with our pants down. And we were not ready for a lot of things that came, and we had to really jump up and do the certain kinds of acrobatics, which we were not ready for. So many things that we had not even thought of became completely, it was something that we had to do. For instance, the teachers, they had not even got into, many of them were not tech savvy at all, but they had to go through this digital transformation in a matter of days. And I feel that when I said that we were caught unawares, most of the departments in our society was at a loss initially. But it was the schools that actually jumped up and took took the front stage. And we teachers, we really need to salute these teachers, because they had to do a whole lot of learning at that time, changing the way that they were conducting their classes. They had to learn a lot of unfamiliar things, like the various kinds of platforms and how to use them, and how to work on their lessons, and so you deliver it so that the children are able to learn, children are able to get something out of it. Then, of course, we also had the poor. Actually, we were never called, the teachers were never acknowledged till a long time. Initially, we had the COVID warriors, included only the doctors and the sanitation workers and the policemen and the the delivery boys. But I feel that the teachers had not been acknowledged as the COVID warriors, because they are the ones who have actually been doing, who have also been, not actually, who have also been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to keep our children engaged, to make sure that the academic year does not get disturbed too much. So they were ready to work for longer hours. They were able to work for, they allowed the children into their homes through when they were taking their online classes, however humble their homes were. They lost their own family privacy for that. Then they actually had to make do with part salaries, which is again another painful issue. So it is something that is touching very many of us. And also they had to tolerate a lot of criticism of the parents who were sitting at the shoulders of the children, along with the children, and making critiques about the way the teachers were teaching. So it was something that really needed to be addressed. It was not until a video that went viral, where we had this wonderful gentleman pediatrician who spoke about how difficult it is for somebody to perform their duties with somebody breathing down, with an audience breathing down their necks. It was then that things started evening out for teachers. So now, of course, they are fully equipped with what they had to do. The trainings have been done, and now they are ready. And now they are ready to teach you that this has been the best part of lockdown for many children. It was that familiar face that they were seeing every day on their screens, no doubt. But still, it gave them a feeling that there was a certain amount of normalcy in their lives, which was otherwise actually all haywire, with all of them inside their school, inside their homes. So I feel that the teachers have really touched many, many lives at this point of time. And yes, as Dr. Manjari said, that we need to have we need to limit screen time. We need to keep. But tell me one thing: what happens when these children, if the toddlers are only given 1 hour of screen, of online learning? What happens when the parents go back to work? What is going to happen to those people? Are they going to who is going to take care of these children till then? Who is going to keep them engaged? That is something that really bothers me. So these are some of the things. And yes, as you rightly said, children with special needs cannot be catered to. For that also, we need to have our own, in inclusive schools especially, we need to have teachers working overtime to give them individual attention, to give them spaced out learning, to give them more practice, and so on and so forth. So I feel that that this has been a kind of an eye-opener for all of us. There are a lot of things that need to be done. We have sent a mission to the Mars, but we have not looked into our health care infrastructure. We have had high-rise buildings coming up, but we have not thought about this kind of an eventuality about chameleons. Where will they go? So these are things that have really given food for thoughts to many people. And now that is what is going to be should be our priority in the days to come. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Tulsi ji, for bringing that element that, nobody, is thanking the teachers. I think that, many of the teachers self-learned how to deal with the, online teaching. They were not knowing. Particularly, I feel so bad for the government school teachers. It was really, really difficult. But they were ready to self-learn and to do the needful as per the call of the hour. And my big clap for them that they have really come up very well with all that is, that was their own effort to be connected with their education. So thank you so much. I'll come back with the questions to you, which you stated some of the things. My questions are popping in my mind, but definitely I'll come back to you. Definitely now I welcome Dr. Moti. Dr. Moti, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead with your views.
Thank you so much. After the two wonderful speeches, let me see what can I do. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Rajeshwari Narendran, Mr. Nataraj Ray, Dr. Kurian Daniel, and other panelists. The topic was quite interesting, but it really took some time for me to decipher the idea behind the people who had this caption. Now, COVID-19 is yet another challenge to the human race. I think we have had enough challenges in history, like the bubonic plague, the influenza, the SARS recently, maybe the smallpox. And if you turn back to history, you'll know that we have come across everything. So let's be optimistic. COVID-19 will also go, and we will survive this. Now, anywhere, all these adjustments, there's a very nice term used by everybody. It's called the new norm. So now let's see what's a new norm when you're using screens. The most wonderful machine on earth is the human body. I've always been amazed all these 30 years of my medical career. And of course, the most ingenious camera in the world is the human eye. Now I'll be touching upon two specific issues, which two aspects which will be affecting the eyes. I'll just keep myself to that. For a better understanding, I'll go about the ophthalmology, maybe a little of optics, and then we'll come to the how we're going to solve this. Now, when a human being looks at a distance, the eye is supposed to be at rest. Okay, so the whole apparatus is at rest. Now, when objects start coming closer to us, what happens is we have an inbuilt autofocus mechanism in our eyes. This autofocus mechanism consists of the human lens, which has the ciliary muscle around it, the retina, the brain. Now, when an object falls on the retina, if it's blurred, if it's coming closer, if it's blurred, the retina sends signals to the brain, and the brain says, okay, it's blurred, do something about it. The ciliary muscle works, and it makes the crystalline, the human crystalline lens more convex. By doing this, the object becomes clear. Now, what happens is, as the object comes closer to the eyes, the ciliary muscle will have to really work on it to make the image clear. And if this happens for prolonged periods of time, the whole burden falls on the ciliary muscle. Now, if this goes on for prolonged periods of times, what happens is the ciliary muscle actually gets mad and it cries for help to the brain. The brain looks at the scenario, and then the brain has only one such option to adjust this. It triggers the whole eye to grow longer. We call this the axial length. And as a matter of fact, when the eye grows longer, the ciliary muscle relaxes to a certain extent, and then the eye is at rest. But what happens when the eye grows longer? The eye actually becomes myopic, in the sense, when you look at a distance, the image becomes blurred. So the eye becomes myopic. You need negative lenses to correct this. And this is what happens when you get into too much of near work, and even worse when you use too many hours of screen work. Now, so the idea is that intense near vision work triggers or actually induces myopia. That's sort of been proved now through a lot of studies. Now what do? We have two options. One, you increase the distance while you are at work. So maybe 1 meter is quite possible, or you can even pull it away further down by using probably your TV. I just thought about a lot of things, but not as an ophthalmologist, like a father or a parent. It looks like we'll have to look out and invent gadgets to pull the screen away from a person's or a child's eye, so that the ciliary muscle works less and it does not trigger myopia. For example, there's something called a Fresnel lens. It's spelled as Fresnel, F-R-E-S-N-E-L. These Fresnel lenses, when fitted in front of any mobile device, mobile phone, then it enlarges the view, it enlarges the image. So you can pull the phone away from the child so that you can have a good picture. Interestingly, I believe there is a device which converts a regular TV into an Android TV. So you can cast all the lessons from the mobile phone to the TV screen, and you can watch it at a distance at an enlarged state. So we have to invent and innovate and maybe think of ideas to, one, reduce screen time, two, to increase the distance of viewing. Now, to reduce screen time, I would even suggest why only touch screens? I think we should also think about the radio to teach, so that only we can even close our eyes and listen to it and learn. I think that should be one of the ways of to reduce screen time. So that's about the TV screens. There is another issue which the eye suffers when you when you do prolonged near work. The human eye has something, all of you know, the black of the eye, which is called the cornea, has one thin layer of tear film. This tear film is maintained by the blinking of the lid. Now, what happens is, in normal circumstances, when you're looking at a distance, the eye blinks around 12 to 18 times. But when you do near work, more so, when you're looking at a gadget, a screen, a laptop, or an iPad, actually you concentrate more and the blink rate goes down. So when the blink rate goes down, the tear film is disturbed and the image gets blurry. You have watering, you might have irritation, you might have headache. Now, to avoid this, what you need to do is every 20 minutes, you need a break of 1 or 2 minutes. The best is to close your eyes or look at a distance to relax the eyeball. Next thing is, you can close the eye and put a wet cloth over your eyes so that the eye becomes wet and you get better. So prolonged use of any gadget has these two issues. I would even like to say that it's not the touch screen is at fault. The human race, the Homo sapiens, are actually hunter-gatherers. In evolution, what has happened is we have all become confined to spaces, and we are using only near vision more than the distance vision. So now the body is not able to adjust to it. So we need to innovate and sort this out. So I feel touch screens are touching hearts. So I think we need to innovate. Where there's a will, there's a way. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So nice, Dr. Mothi. You brought so many perspectives, and again, it is prompting me to ask so many good questions. But I think we will wait, because here is Dr. Ushi with us. Let her also speak her perspective and what she thinks about our touch screen or touching heart, and what are the e-learning things, because she is also deeply into it. Welcome, Dr. Ushi. If you could please come up.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I learned a lot from all the panelists today, Dr. Moti, Dr. Mandri, and of course, Tulsi. And as I keep listening to you also, Rajeshwari, I'm learning a lot. I just heard a statement, where there's a will, there's a highway. I like to tweak it a little bit and say that where there is a will, there is a super highway or a runway. In today's world, children are much faster than they were during our times. And I just would love to say that, we have something called virtual reality, which has taken over the entire domain of education today. The word itself explains it to me: virtual reality, which means that the classroom is reality and virtual reality is something transient. It is something that we need to resort to during current times, because we are not able to be in the physical spaces. And I would love to tell people here that I believe that if I say that this is virtual reality, thereby it's not reality, please don't get me wrong here. Everything is real. The teacher is real, the student is real. All right? The classroom is not real. And I believe that physical classrooms cannot be replaced by virtual classrooms. You might be able to visit a virtual classroom, but there's nothing which is a replacement for a physical classroom, because it is a time-tested, structured environment. And in a time-tested, structured environment, the main ingredient between teacher and teacher, teacher and student, student and student, is something called emotion, is something called atmosphere. And unless we go through the grind of exchanging energy and not merely exchanging facts and figures, we do not turn out to be complete human beings. And that is what really structures the environment to prepare each child to be unique, and not each child to just get 99.9%, in which case we are not just artificially intelligent, but I think we also need to make space for being naturally stupid. Can you imagine 90% of all the people in this room being perfect? I can't imagine it. And guess what happens? Children today are really smart. And today morning, I talked to a lot of teachers. She was telling me, she asked a student online, can I ask you a question? And the student said, you already have asked me a question. So they're as smart as that today, without any virtual intervention. So I think it's just a very transient phase. The environment, the touch and the tangential quality of being in a real classroom cannot be experienced in a virtual classroom. It's always a one-on-one reaction. It's not a one-to-many reaction. Second thing is, the depth of learning will be reduced tremendously, and we will only be able to give in logic, facts, and figures. The emotional component in virtual learning is absolutely almost missing. And I, being a behavioral therapist, would believe that unless there is emotion to every single word that is said or every single detail that is taught, except in subject like math or physics or anything that relies on numbers and rote logic, I believe that virtual classrooms are just a temporary arrangement. They're not here to stay. There might be one part of the learning, but not every single part of the learning. The teachers, no doubt, are putting in a lot of effort. I myself am a teacher, though I teach bigger students. I've been a teacher of medicine for the last 30 plus years. I've been the dean of a medical school for many, many years. And I understand the nitty-gritties that come along with it. I spend a lot of time online, but guess what? Today, I had coffee with a friend of mine live, one-on-one, and nothing felt better than that. Taking a break, having lunches together, discussing, fighting, forming groups, playing sport, all the physical activity that comes in with a real classroom is what children must be exposed to. If you're 2 years old or 5 years old or even 13 years old, I think it's really important that as we go along, people do not allow this virtual reality to take over and ensure that it's easier to do once you learn it, and thereby we stick to something easier, which is a natural tendency of the human brain to choose between A and B when A is the easier product to choose. It's also very easy to set up a lab, but guess who runs the lab? Human beings. Guess who runs a classroom? The teacher and the student together. Guess what happens when you throw a student outside of the class? How would you do that in a virtual atmosphere? What would you show them? A reprimand through an emoticon, is it? It just doesn't work. So discipline gets destroyed. The complete emotion gets destroyed. The tangible nature of a classroom is lost. Even in real life, in your and my life, we will have teachers who we remember till today. It cannot happen in the online world because everything depends on the kind of information every teacher is given. So it's standardized information irrespective of the teacher. Where are the teaching skills coming into play? It's all a lot of information and logic. It's rote learning. We prepare hundreds of students who can get 99.9, but we do not prepare empathetic students. We don't prepare compassionate students. We don't prepare students who develop some form of love, bonding, and attachment. And I think it's extremely important we don't lose track here, because at the end of the day, virtual reality is only a transitional phase. We can have one part of the learning through the computer, but I still believe that the majority of the learning comes in through personal interactions. Can you imagine that we're discussing that I love you on an email? It just doesn't work. You want to pick up the phone and speak to the person. You want to meet a person. You really want to take it beyond that virtual dating application that people are on. So I seriously believe that we're getting too carried away with the excitement of this virtual reality. We need to contain it in space. I love and respect teachers. I also respect the efforts that people are putting in. I understand what happens to the behavior. We had a very able psychiatrist to explain to us screen time. And guess what? The very same schools used to send circulars to children and parents and say, please control your child's screen time at home. And today we ourselves are recommending more screen time. So it's ironic. However, virtual reality can never replace a classroom. So please watch it. 3 to 6 months is all I give it. It might become a part of the curriculum, but it can never ever replace real classroom environment nor interactions. The atmosphere needs to be real. The emotion needs to be real. Only then education becomes complete. The computer is nothing but a machine that is run by people who are emotional and sitting behind it. I'm sure that the student will never remember a single teacher who taught them online. It's as simple as that, unless you show them something entertaining and unless you allow them to sleep and play games. So it's very simple. We cannot monitor anything that they do. Children are super smart. Like I said, when I showed a PowerPoint slide, which was related to conjunctivitis, and I asked a student, what is this? He said, a site for sore eyes. The moment the PowerPoint is on, my sleep button gets switched on. And you know what they do? They just switch off and go to sleep. It's such a waste of everybody's time. But sometimes because of situations, we're just using what is available to us so that we don't keep idle. So it is a part of learning, but it is surely not a replacement. I believe that online is just a small, small part of the real classroom. Nothing like real. Back to you, Rajeshwari.
Wow, Dr. Ushi. I definitely love the expression that it is just a transient phase. Nothing can replace the classroom teaching or the love, affection, bond that is created when there is a socializing in the school or colleges, when we meet each other. Definitely that cannot be replicated on a screen. And even if you show, it looks so fake. Yeah, even if you want to show something like that, it really is so much fake. And we don't live in the fantasy world. So definitely it's a very, very important point which you have brought in. To see that, the discipline gets destroyed. I got very interesting, video where a teacher is taking a class and there is a character in Hindi serial called Jethalal. Someone has logged in as Jethalal. Now the teacher is scolding, ye Jethalal kaun hai? Ye Jethalal kaun hai? Bahar niklo meri class se. Now, she is scolding as if it is it is a real class. And everybody is giggling. Everybody is giggling. So the discipline, like whether it is an online class or a virtual class or a face-to-face class, children are going to play pranks. and it would get you irritated. But at the same time, one point I would like to say, here in one school I know that what they are doing is they are engaging two teachers, while the one teacher is teaching, the other teacher has got to monitor what the children are doing. Some ways they are trying to bring out, but definitely no replacement for the classroom teaching. I bang on there. Now I have certain questions which are popping up through the chat box. I'm also noting them down, but at the same time we have certain questions which were earlier sent to us, so I'm coming back to those questions. And my question is to Madam Tulsi Bhatia. Tulsi, are you there?
Yes, yes, very much so.
Yeah. So I understand, being myself a university teacher as well. We got every day, like some kind of a notice from the governor, who happens to be our chancellor. Then the VC sends the same notice, then the registrar sends the same notice, then the dean sends the same notice that you have to do all these things, e-content development. So there is continuous pressure. Then the children are pressurized. You yourself as a teacher, you feel pressurized. The systems are not in place. There is a lot of expectation of the parents now, that how it is going to happen. A lot of anxieties are there. So how do you feel that, being the educator, what are the preparedness, and how well it is going into the Indian psyche for whatever small period the complete online mode of learning is? But still, can we look into through your eyes that what is the preparedness?
Yeah. See, there's a lot of uh, concern from the parents' side, which is quite natural. Somebody else had also spoken about this. Sometimes the concern is about lack of devices at home, because they may be having two children, and so one of them is using the PC and the other is using the telephone. And at the same time, if it is a parent who has to also work from home, so devices are a problem. The children, then the next thing is the parents are, of course, now we have two schools of thought. One saying that the schools should open because we have the curriculum has to finish, because the CBSE or the ICSE is not going to totally cancel the exams which will be coming up. So we are worried about the curriculum being completed. But at the same time, you have a group of parents who are saying, I'm not going to send my child to school because it's not safe, which I understand. And now there's another thing that is popping up. I even think about the toddlers, where parents are not going to be at home. So who is going to be taking care of them? So these are the issues that parents are facing. Parents have these various concerns. And then they also feel that, is this just, so far they feel that that the learning that the child has, that the learning that has taken place has not been complete, because of the way the children have not been able to give feedback to the teachers, or maybe the timing was not enough, or maybe the teacher was teaching a prepared lesson. So there was that, as just now Dr. Ushi had spoken about, that connect is not yet formed. So that is a problem. From the kids' point of view, I feel, yes, you brought up a very important part that day about the kids. What about the kids in the rural areas? What about the kids in the Anganwadis? Are they going to have, what is going to happen to their education? Theirs is more or less like a triple whammy, because not only have they missed out, not only are they missing out on their studies, they're also missing out on their midday meals. They're missing out on their inoculations. So they are just, sitting at home doing nothing. And they are just, things are not working as it should. So because schools are so very important, it's all very well to think that, we can teach children online, but how far is our reach as far as online is concerned? In the same way, I feel that parents are also, the teachers are worried whether There are so many practical subjects that have to be completed that will not be that is not possible online. And at best, as Dr. Ushi just said, it has to be something very, very temporary. We are all looking forward to the schools reopening. Now the government also has a lot to do now. The government has to make sure. Now this is the time when probably this lockdown time should have been used to improve the infrastructure of primary schools and middle schools in the country. Maybe they have to build toilets. They have to. Many of the schools don't have electricity, so naturally you can't think about any kind of computing or anything happening. Why not have a computer? Why not train the teachers to even in these primary schools to have, even those children need that kind of an education. What about monitoring them? So this is a very good time for government also to pull up its socks and say that, okay, now just like you have reforms coming up in the agricultural sector, a lot of reforms have to come into the education sector. It has to come up, because it's all very well to tell the affluent sections of society that we are going to have online classes, but what happens to all these places that have no access to any kind of online education? How is it going to be practical? So these are worries that really keep us thinking about how to what to do. And now we also have this the schools also have to be working towards their improving, changing their, investing on infrastructure, changing their training methodology, getting teachers also have to be provided with devices if possible, because all teachers cannot afford the various apps or even the devices that are required. So schools should start doing all this. So these are certain worries that are really keeping us awake as far as what is going to happen. Definitely, I feel that July and August is going to be, again, classes are going to be online. We worry about that, and how much of it can we do legitimately and do justice to, I don't know. But then my vision is that academics should not be the be all and end all of education. It should be, we should start training children for other things. But that, I feel, we need to think about a whole new paradigm as far as what are the things, how we can change the entire pedagogy so that we can have a different bent towards our education system. So that is what I think about.
Thank you, Tulsi. I think you said it very nicely that, still, there is a huge gap in haves and have-nots. Huge
Yes.
gap is there. And governments and local administration or village administrations are unable to help because there is this change was so sudden. We were not prepared. There are challenges. Parents, they have their apprehensions. The children have anxiety around their own lives and so many other things coming up. And even I tell you, like one of the positive case was just opposite our home. The next day, very next day, there were government school teachers who were deployed to ask whether you have any fever, whether you have any cough, whether you have. So they are being deployed even for those kind of jobs, for voting, for everything.
Yes.
They are being, for counting the duties, for election, for any polio drop mission, to feed India mission, to teach India mission. Everywhere teachers are being used, or sometimes
That's
I
right.
feel being misused.
Yes.
But at the same time, who has got the larger connectivity? And the other day I was listening to our HRD minister who was telling that now the radio classes are going to be, started pretty soon. And then I saw the inauguration happening. So there are some larger perspectives coming up, but it is taking time. That is my concern. But my larger concern, and I think I got some questions also from Mr. Piyush Jani to Dr. Moti specifically, that it is so difficult to have you spoke about that, how you can relax yourself every 20 minutes or every hourly, how you can just do certain things. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I think there are a lot of concerns for the small children, particularly the adolescent or the young infants, those who are going to school. So how can we take care of their eyes, and then the headaches and associated things. Like even I think we spoke about it, that even I, because now my screen time before COVID was 1 hour 3 minutes or so on an average, but now it is 14 hours. So I have this dry eye syndrome. So maybe there are so many other people also around it who may have this kind of trouble. So what is your call on that, please?
Yeah, actually, this term was devised a few years ago, maybe 5 years. It's called the computer vision syndrome.
Yeah.
Basically, like what I explained, it is because of the reduction in the blink rate of the eye, the tear film becomes unstable, dry, and due to that, you get all these symptoms. Now, the best way is to have a break every 20 minutes. Having a break in the sense you should look at a distance to relax your eyes so that you blink more. Number two, you can close your eyes. Number three, you can wet your eyes or wash your face. And if all these things does not work, the only thing is to use some artificial tears drops. But if you generally have a break every 20 minutes, I think that would suffice. I even advise this for a lot of software engineers who keep working for more than 10, 12 hours. So actually, though this is a problem, this actually doesn't hurt the eye. So we needn't be bothered about this. And as I told you, a cold compress, maybe 4 hours once, take a break, take a cold compress on the eye. It would, in fact, work wonders. And another thing we can do is the brightness of the screen should be sort of equal to or less than the room light. So you got to adjust it. So don't make it very bright. This also becomes an issue. And you try and push your computer as much as possible. Maybe even some people enlarge the font sizes, and I mean, if that is possible, even that is okay. So that's how you manage this.
Yeah, so there is one question to you from Mr. Chandrasekhar. The question to you, Dr. Moti, that, how to overcome the blurred images or text. Maybe because of the overuse of eyes, this is happening. So I hope you have already answered, or you would still have some more to add.
I think that's the same thing. If it's an adult who is around 40, then he needs to check his eyes. If it's anybody else who's already have corrected glasses and was a young person, again, it's because of the dryness of the eyes. So you need to do the same tricks. Take a break, have cold compresses, look at a distance. If all this doesn't work, go to an ophthalmologist and get some tear substitutes prescribed.
Yeah. That's helpful, I think. Yeah, and does it take care of the headaches also if you moist your eyes?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay, actually, great. I think that's a very good.
If your glasses are not adequate, let's say you have hypermetropia, which means you have plus power. If it's undercorrected, then you will have problems. So if the problem does not disappear with whatever I said, then maybe you need to go to an ophthalmologist and check your glasses again.
Yeah. That's very useful, Dr. Moti. So my question to Dr. Manjari is, there are issues like even some of the audience are putting the questions like how to check the behavior pattern of the students. There is one question, but more than that, I feel there is a more important question at this moment, that our teachers, though they maybe most of them are trained, but they are not trained to identify the psychological disorders by online or offline, whether they are teaching directly or whether they are teaching online. It is very hard for the parents and teacher to identify the learning disorders in the children, particularly the small children. So how can you give some tips for everyone to understand, because this is a very important area, I believe, that teachers and trainers should identify, because I know I have been dealing with dyslexic children. I have been dealing with difficult children who have learning difficulties. They can't write. They are very good at pictorial things and everything, but they can't write, or they can't speak. Some of them cannot speak. They have different types of disorders. So can you throw some light on these kind of disorders? So there is symptom for parents and for the teachers to identify. You are unmute. You have to unmute.
So when we talk about education, when we talk about a child's learning capacity, there are a couple of factors involved in making sure that the child can grasp what is being taught to him. I think one of the important things is attention. Now we know that attention span in kids, very young kids, is very limited. But yes, if the child has extreme short attention span, the child is, one common disorder that we diagnose and see in a lot of kids is ADHD. That is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. These kids actually have a very normal IQ, but their sitting tolerance is very poor, their attention span is very poor, and they are extremely impulsive. So as psychiatrists, we keep doing these kind of workshops for teachers, for parents, to make them understand what are the common psychological issues in children. Now, if you talk about kids less than 6 years, the most common psychological problems are, one is ADHD, that is this attention deficit problem. So the child just doesn't sit in one place. I'm talking about a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. It's very normal for a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old to not be able to sit in one place. But when that child is going to school and is not able to sit in one place, cannot sit through an activity, cannot pay attention for a long time, these may be symptoms of what we call as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Then, as you said, that you work with a lot of dyslexic students. So dyslexia, that is learning disability, is also another common condition seen about in 10% of children. So in a classroom, easily 1 or 2 kids may be having learning disability. Usually the parent or the child starts feeling that my child is not interested in studies, or doesn't want to study, or is just making excuses. Now this child is actually not making excuses. He has a difficulty in perception. So learning difficulty is basically a problem in perception. So they can speak very well, they can answer those questions orally, but they have a difficulty in reading, writing, and math. Generally it's called as dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So we start observing children as young as 4 to see their writing pattern. So at 4, it is still normal that they write reverse alphabets, etc. But if that is being consistent, they have issues in writing alphabets, reversal of alphabets, or spelling errors. They know it well, they can say it well probably, but when it comes to writing, they are not able to spell the words properly. So they have difficulty in reading, writing, or maths. It's called as learning disability. So ADHD, learning disability, and autism, which is a neurodevelopmental disorder, these are some of, and of course there is a concept of academic backwardness called as slow learners. So that means they are slightly lower on the average. So their IQ is, we calculate IQ, so anything above 90 is considered as normal. Kids who are between 70 to 90, they have a problem, because neither are they intellectually disabled, so it's not very evident, it's not, you can't understand it clearly. And above 90, it's not even above 90. So these kids find it difficult to comprehend instruction on a one-to-one basis. So that teacher may have to give that instruction to this child 5 times if she has to give it 1 time to this. So if parents, especially now when you're at home, if you start observing the writing, how your child is writing, spending one-to-one interaction, and that is why I said for young kids, online learning is very, very difficult, because it is the multi-sensory approach. When we start teaching kids with dyslexia, or when we do their therapy, if they are not able to write, we start making them write in sand, start making them write on rough paper, using multiple senses. Now this cannot be done online. So obviously for younger kids, online teaching is very difficult. But yes, I think this is the best time that parents can embrace this. Parents can start understanding about their child's learning pattern and identify if the child has a problem. Because in all these disorders, because I said the brain is plastic, like I said it's earlier, and brain development is maximum in young ages, if we do anything about it at that time, we do therapy, we do remediation, it is possible that the child overcomes this problem. So less than 6 years of age, all said and done, when we start early, so we stress on early intervention, early detection. So I think right now parents can start identifying if they see these issues in their children.
Yeah. So, Dr. Manjari, it was a great input that now this is the parents also to even look at the learning patterns and observe them more closely. But at the same time, they may be very intrusive to the child. Sometimes I see the parents are too worried about what is being taught. They are always monitoring screens of their children, and they are always even feedback to each other that say, "Hey, you're not doing it right," or they are very, very anxious about it. I'll come back to that question maybe a little later. But Dr. Ushi, I was just going through certain things because I'm counseling so many people for their distress during the COVID time. There is a data which says that for 2.5. Domestic violence cases uh, on the head number have gone up to 1,92,000, which if you total it up last 3 years, it was that much. So during this, I think people, even adults, are behaving in a very, very difficult way. So there is a rampant increase in child abuse and domestic violence, a lot of depression. There are people, those whose work have started, they say, no, I don't want to go out because I'm so fearful. There is somebody who said that, oh, I'm diabetic, I cannot go out. He doesn't even go to the veranda of his house. There are so many uh, kind of mental disorders which are being screened. So what can be done at the individual level, at the organization level, or at the family or at institution level to uh, to mitigate this kind of problems and issues?
Well, Rajeshwari, depression has always been a problem, not with just the older people, but with also the younger children. The fact remains that it goes unrecognized and thereby it's also untreated. But I think that if you keep your eyes open and you understand what is behavior, then we can spot a few signs and symptoms in the earlier stages where it doesn't head on to something chronic. And believe me, because somebody is a child, people just pass it off as being sad or cranky, or maybe it's just something temporary and transient. I wouldn't ask every parent or teacher to get alarmed if you see some signs and symptoms of a natural child who's undergoing frustration, disappointment, etc. Because I think that is a natural part of growing up. Everyone cannot be successful, everyone cannot be first, etc. There is a big difference between being sad and being depressed. And in this context, let me tell you, if you just watch out for what they eat, what they play with, how much screen time are they spending, and how much, very, very important, which a lot of people today are overlooking, is how much time does a child sleep. The generation today is sleep deprived. And almost every single child below the age of 15 barely sleeps for 3 to 4 hours. They stay awake late and they also get up early. And sometimes because school timing is different, they get up early. So what happens? It's called the DESS phenomenon: diet, exercise, screen time, and sleep. One needs to watch out for this very carefully, because then the final D will come into play, which is called discipline. We are unable to enforce as parents a strong discipline in a child so that the child develops overall and becomes happy. Now, discipline doesn't mean restrictions. Discipline means encouraging a child to go through with reasonable restrictions. And the biggest problem that happens with parents today is you either allow everything and say, leave me in peace, or you just don't monitor at all. And otherwise, you take everything away and say that I'll not give you a cell phone, I'll not give you a computer, I'll not give you an iPad. It's an extreme. I would adopt something which is very middle. Observe your child, watch out for the frequency, intensity, and duration. It's called the FID. And if you can watch out for the frequency, intensity, and duration of behavior, then you get an average idea about whether a child is comfortable, or whether a child is avoiding something, or whether a child is actually depressed. And depression doesn't happen only because of external elements. Chronic external elements result in a chemical imbalance within the brain of the child as well. So sometimes when you're not eating well, 90% of the serotonin is produced in the gut, and it remains in the gut instead of going up there and firing the neurological system. So whether you're a small child or you're a big child who's an adult, I still think that depression often goes unrecognized and untreated. So if you watch out for sleeplessness, if you watch out for irritability, if you watch out for a child being withdrawn, a child being extremely noisy, a child being an attention seeker 24/7, these are the simplest signs for which you can look in. But most importantly, a child who is sleepless. Children fall asleep at the drop of a hat. But I have seen children who suffer from depression as young as 7 years of age because of all the academic load and the parental pressure and peer pressure. They are unable to sleep without a sedative. And I find it appalling, because a simple routine change, a simple exercise routine, a simple diet change, a simple Not giving chips and burger in your tiffin every day will make a big, big difference to the child, because 90% of the time, ladies and gentlemen, it is the parent that is unknowingly responsible for everything that really goes right or wrong with the child. The teacher comes in next. And other than this, I think the child comes in last, because a young child has no choice. If you give it something to eat, it has to eat it. If you keep getting a child used to something which is a reward and a bribe, there is a very big difference. If you reward a child, it enhances beautiful behavior. But if you're going to bribe a child and say that you get me this and I'll give you this, then I think it's a very wrong practice.
Transactional. It is
Yeah,
very
so
transactional.
it is a matter of looking. When you open the window, somebody sees the sky, the other person sees the sand. So you must change perspectives in children. And when we do that as very smart, effective parents, I don't think a child will suffer. A child feeling sad is very normal, and it is very, very transient and temporary, Rajeshwari. So I would say diet, I would say exercise, I would say screen time, restrict screen time. And at the end of the day, of course, sleep. Children must sleep, whether you like it or not. Put them on the bed, get them used to a routine, get them used to a practice. Believe me, the brain is a creature of routine. It will get used to a certain amount, and it's needed, because at that stage, your brain is developing, your body is developing, your entire adaptive capacities are developing. So you cannot have somebody sit up with a parent and look at the parent and ask a parent, how come you can keep awake till 2 in the morning and I'm supposed to sleep at 9? So we need to role model. All kids imitate parents. And parents don't realize that. You have a father who smokes a cigarette and tells a young boy not to smoke. I wish they would lead by example. So it's as simple as that. So everything starts with roles and modeling, and of course the frequency, intensity, and duration. Back to you, Rajeshwari.
Yeah, yeah. So that brings me one question, Dr. Ushi, to you.
Yeah.
In India, we do not talk a lot about any kind of depression or any mental disorder for that matter.
Yes.
And even the basic communication to sit together and discuss and take a feedback. Dad, I don't like your this habit. If
Yeah.
I say this thing to the daddy would retaliate.
Yes.
You don't know anything.
Mm.
Come on, give me a break.
Mm.
The communication itself in the family, if you see, if I say that you are doing this wrong way, the person may not, and then what to talk about mental disorder? If there is anything like, a depression, or somebody is feeling sad, or there are some kind of mental disorders which are on surface, you can see that something bad is happening, but you would like to put it under the carpet. So what kind of, awareness is needed at the adult in the family, mature in the family, to deal with these kind of problems?
Well, the first thing that I would encourage is honest and open communication. We live in a
Yes.
society which believes that we can piss in public, but we can't kiss in public, right? So we live in a society which has multiple standards. We are a confused lot between MTV and Mahabharat. So we really don't understand the cultural aspect as well as aping the West, right? So a lot of kids are stuck somewhere in between. So I believe that honest, open communication, first of all, through parenting workshops, needs to be encouraged. We need to talk about the bees and the honey way before today. You cannot go and talk to people about sexuality and about physical growth and changes and maturity at the age of 13. Today, children are precautious. They're exposed to a lot of information. So I believe that even in schools, even the teachers should be encouraged to develop a strong, caring bond with the student. And this happens, by the way, only live.
Yes.
You cannot say, I love you 10 bites. You cannot look at somebody and say, if you like me, enter. If you don't like me, exit. Right? So we need to get live here, because we discuss things with people whom we trust, whom we are comfortable with. And if people judge you and reprimand you, there are many parents who come to me and ask me, what does my child think? Because sadly, that child discusses with me, but refuses to discuss with the parent because it trusts me that I'm not going to judge it. And all of us go through a phase of making mistakes. It's very important to make a child aware. And when you make a child aware, it will not be influenced by anything that might change its path of behavioral development. So what parents refrain from, like you said, there's a mental problem. If you have a kidney problem, you go to a doctor. If you have an eye problem, you go to a doctor. If you have a lung problem, you go to a doctor. You notice a mental problem, the first thing you tell everyone is, shh, don't tell anybody. So I'm not really sure why you hide a problem. You have a beautiful psychiatrist over here. I would believe that all of us are actually by default psychiatric patients. And I think we need to regularly just have a chat with a psychiatrist, because I'm sure that at some level we have a kink. And the same thing is with a child. So I'm not sure why it's so taboo. If I inform a child and I give it reasonable freedom with certain boundaries and give them a long rope, they do find space to explore themselves. Why do you think so much rape happens in India? Why do you think so much of physical abuse happens as people are confined in their homes? Because we don't have a place to vent. We don't have a place to understand and allow expression of anything that is repressed. And the more we repress things, the more it expresses. So for me, the number one and the only thing that can be arranged and encouraged is honest, open communications. The second very important thing is the child needs to be developing great emotional bonds with caring adults. It might be a parent or it might be a relative. It can also be a teacher. Believe me, we do have teachers in whom we confide. Believe me, we have teachers in whom we share certain things that, is bothering us. So I believe that other than taking a class, we must encourage healthy conversations. If we are able to encourage healthy conversations, we will be able to establish predictability, one, and stability. With predictability and stability, no child can go wrong. All of us are unique. And I think just by mere observation and heightening awareness, 90% of the problem can be solved. And with honest, open communications, if the parent has an issue, hire somebody, seek help, go to a therapist, go to a specialist. There are so many qualified, very experienced people who can tell the bee and the flower story much better than you. Because this is the most embarrassing. We live in a generation of same-sex marriages today. We live in a generation where kids are growing up in a society where sexuality cannot be hidden. It has to be brought in the open, maybe not like in the West. I'm not suggesting that you need to be promiscuous. I'm only suggesting that the child needs to know, because a child who is ignorant is definitely a victim in the future. A child who doesn't know what is a good and a bad touch is very likely to be abused, maybe not physically, but also emotionally and otherwise also socially. So in our country, we think abuse is being raped and molested. There are many other forms of abuse. And I think we get exposed to it, we ignore it, and it reaches a stage where we are full of something we cannot share. And thereby the personality gets deflected. That's all I have to share, Rajeshwari. Seek help, honest, open communications, and very, very important, ensure that teachers are also enabled to speak a language today's child understands. That's
Great. That's very, very beautifully expressed, Dr. Ushi Mohandas. It's really wonderful. I have, a connected question to Dr. Manjari. Even I came across a parent, who just said that, Madam, my 13-year-old child, I'm a single mother, I'm a single parent because I'm a divorcee. And this boy has been always very nice, very good. I've been giving him everything, whatever he demands. But suddenly one day I just said that this mobile, I cannot gift you iPhone because this is not going to happen. I don't have that money. And you won't believe that this child has beaten up the mother like anything. She was, everywhere she had blue scars. This child has actually, लाते मारी है माँ को नीचे गिरा कर. So even that kind of violent behaviors, the irritant child is also always seen around, whining, crying, that those kind of, even the parents are finding it very difficult. And one parent exclaimed, पता नहीं स्कूल टीचर कैसे संभालते हैं हमारे बच्चों को, हम तो यहाँ 1 घंटे संभालने में हमारे पसीने छूटते. That they were appreciating teachers, and this guys, maybe Tulsi would be happy to know about it. But I really want you to address this particular kind of syndrome.
Yeah, so aggression, as you said, that's in a 13-year-old. In my clinic, I've come across, aggressive kids as young as 3 who are aggressive. core who are violent. I mean, I think we never knew of hitting our parents, shouting back and talking rudely at our parents. But I think obviously aggression is something that is on the rise. Now, there are multiple factors involved. A 13-year-old, obviously, it also depends on how he asked his mother and what went before it. I mean, sometimes what parents do all their life till now, they've been extremely permissive, giving in to every demand of the child.
Yes.
These kids are very impulsive because, they don't have the patience to wait. So gratification, we try to tell parents, teach kids to delay gratification. That means if your child asks for something, you need not give it immediately. Unfortunately, today's world, kids are overstimulated. They have abundance of everything. Even before they ask for things, it's been given to them already. So this has made this generation of kids extremely impulsive, aggressive, and the parent has been giving me everything till now. So obviously the child feels entitled to getting whatever the child asks. So suddenly today, when my mom says I don't have money for an iPhone, he just cannot reason out why the mother can't buy him the iPhone. A better would be a way to be sitting down and communicating with the child. I mean, I tell parents, there is a concept of need, want, and desire. So parents have to understand. Now, to give you an example, like shoes may be a need, So today's child, obviously, because he has jogging or he has PT exercises in school, he needs sports shoes. Now, that's a basic need. What a child demands is probably, those high-end Nike or Spiker shoes, which cost about 4,000. Now, that's or with LED light spot. That's a desire. And there is a want that I want some kind of branded shoes. So for parent, it is important that the parent understands what the child is asking for. Is it a need? Is it a want or a desire? Most of the time in today's times, parents are fulfilling all the desires of the child, giving them expensive things. So one fine day when you don't give, obviously it's very difficult. So from the time the child is small, if we start with simple things like fulfilling their needs at all occasion, desires can be preserved for, things like, their birthday or Diwali, etc. And wants once in a while when the child has done something good or the child really deserves it. So I think it also depends a lot on the parenting style. Like in previous session, it was said that parenting style, I agree with her when she said that, it is mostly the parents issue. It is, I'm a child psychiatrist, so obviously parents get their children to me, but during this many times I have clearly told parents that it is not the child who needs to be counseled,
Yes.
it's the parent who needs to be counseled.
They need
Small
counseling.
changes made from the parent end. So there are helicopter parents, there are over permissive parents. This kind of parenting, today you can afford it. Tomorrow when your child asks for the car, you obviously cannot give it. And I think it's more of the parenting style that has made this generation extremely impulsive, aggressive, as most kids today are. Of course, there may be psychiatric disorders involved, like you said, depression. Yes, 50% of all psychiatric disorders actually start before 14. I think very few people are aware of it. When I say I'm a child psychiatrist, most commonly people ask me, do children really have psychiatric illnesses? That's the kind of awareness in India. But the statistics, I mean, the real figures are most of the adult illnesses actually begin before the age of 14. So at that age, if we start paying attention, like she said, to the child's sleeping patterns, eating patterns, etc., maybe this child has depression. Maybe the child has what we call as conduct disorder, which is something you can diagnose at 9 or 10 and do effective therapy so that he doesn't reach the point where he's aggressive with his mom. And even then, I think with few parenting techniques, strategies, I think improving the communication, this clear, honest communication, I fully agree with her that clear, honest communication is the only way to help solve a lot of psychiatric issues, which is the main thing missing. Because, of course, the truth is parents don't have time. Parents are working, they say we don't have time. It's about quality, not quantity. You spend 1 hour per day with your child, but it has to be quality time that you spend with your child.
Great, Dr. Manjari. This comes to a question to Tulsi. Madam Tulsi, like, how are you seeing, like, in your school or otherwise wherever your networks are, how parents are behaving for the their wards to be supported during online learning, or otherwise, like, what kind of behaviors you see in them uh, from the perspective of the parents, I'm asking.
Yeah. When we started off with online teaching on the 3rd of April, it was all very novel. There was a certain novelty to it. So naturally, there was a lot of excitement. There were parents sitting with the children and going through the classes. And the teachers were also very excited because it was a new way of teaching, and there was a lot of feedback coming in from the parents. Initially, we had a lot of it was all hunky dory. Everybody was enjoying it. There were we had about 3.5 to 4 hours of real learning happening, and with, of course, breaks in between, sufficient breaks in between, and it was appreciated a lot. But then we noticed later that the children were bunking. Now, I don't know whether it was bunking. There were a lot of, it must have been a network connectivity which was not up to the mark in some areas, but some children were bunking. There were children. So when we got back to the to the parents and talked about it, they said, of course, that it's happening. They are studying. It's because they're not able to log in and so on and so forth. Now, at that time, it was all very good. And at the same time, they thought that this is all going to end now. This is just fun and games that we are going to happen. And very soon, when the schools reopen, which is going to happen by the 31st of May, people thought that everything is going to be redone for their children. Back to normal, and the children will get extra classes. They can go for tuitions. They can do. So that was not taken so seriously. It was only later on, when the things started getting a little dicey outside, that people realize that this is not going to be fun and games anymore. This is the serious thing. If we don't have, if our child does not attend these classes, we are going to have a lot of problems on hand. So they started communicating with us about how, they want more assignments. So it has been very positive from in a school like ours, which is actually a boarding school. But I have noticed that even in Kerala, I was just reading the other day that Kerala government has taken up a lot of initiatives about putting up screens in places where children can, with social distancing, of course, they can have their classes without uninterrupted classes. And so I feel that it has been taken very positively. There has been no problem at all. Children have also been enjoying, because the main thing is to keep the children engaged with, it's not the same old class. It's not the same class which you are having.
There comes a question, Tulsi, from Mr. Somshekhar or Som Shankar, that, how to engage the children below 5 years through the learn from home mode. Do you have anything specific to add here?
See, engaging children below 5 years is, of course, a wonderful thing. But the thing is, it cannot be through teaching them. It has to be through games, through activities, through experiments that you give them to do. In fact, even the older children, the middle school children, they enjoy that. When you encourage them to participate, when you tell them to make a model and bring it next day with whatever available stuff that you have at home, you make a science project and bring it, and if they are told to have an online debate which is impromptu, they're ready to talk about it, of course. So this is the way to engage, and it has to be, this is the way forward also. In fact, we no more of those long summative assessments and all will work. I think COVID and the lockdown has been, in a way, a kind of a blessing in disguise in many areas, in the sense that we have had a chance to rethink the way we teach. It has been a very, very, it has been an eye-opener. We have been hearing about in places like Finland, where teaching learning process takes place in a different way, but it has all been very, it has not been real for us, frankly. So now that we have started with this kind of thing, and we have realized that now the time has come that we have to completely change our methodology. We have to look at more, continuous assessments within the class itself. We have to have a circle time. We have to have things like, little quizzes for the children. Then we have to have, small debates about the topic in hand itself with the children. These are things, less policing, of course. That is going to be one of the biggest things, because still we have to inculcate trust, and we have to teach the children digital etiquette. We have to tell them, not sermonize. We have to explain to them the horrors of misuse of technology. We have to teach them how to, through case studies, we have to tell them, and we have to get them to make the rules now. It's best is to make the children do the rules. So so if we get that done, the parents are also going to be happy, because they see a much more responsible, independent, thinking child. And that is what we have to look at now.
Yeah. So there was an expression by one Mr. Mujib, he was telling, is there a national policy? I would say yes. Just go to the Ministry of HRD website, you will get it. And Dr. Rao is still there. I believe if he can, unmute himself and say that how the trainings are going. Trainings at the corporate level, at the webinar level are going. Sir, would you have any inputs to add, please, here? Dr. Rao, are you there? Dr. TV Rao?
No, ma'am, I don't see him. Yeah, he's there.
Can we identify between allergies and the eye strain due to the screen time?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect you to ask me this question. First of all, let me compliment all the speakers and you for such a wonderful session. I think it's excellent. I think now ISTD goes to the community level and chooses topics which are useful for everyone. For the question you asked me, Rajeshwari,
Yes, sir.
a 2-hour seminar, a webinar meant for students, faculty, and so on a while ago, before I joined this. And they worked in groups. And what I found missing was the energy. This is because there is no face-to-face contact. And I thought, what could have been accomplished in 2 hours if it is some kind of a face-to-face discussion? I think could not be accomplished in a Zoom session. At the end of the day, I was feeling a little disappointed, and I came to the conclusion that, as many of them pointed out, this cannot go on and on. This should be only an aid. What is happening in the corporate sector is people are just tasting the novelty and all. I think when it settles down, people will come back to what the speakers are saying, that it is going to be, it's more, if you want to touch the hearts, it has got to be out of the screen. Screen only can touch at best maybe a little bit of your intellect, but not really the hearts. And India works by heart, not by the brain. This is what I think.
Very well said, Dr. TV Rao. Thank you so much for your input. And I see that even corporate people are struggling to conduct the training program, and they are questioning the effectivity of this. Though Zoom has got breakout rooms, you can let them do some discussions, you can do so many other activities, but still, touching heart thing is definitely missing. Thank you so much for your input. Dr. Moti, I come back to you for my question on, can you really differentiate between allergies, eye allergies, and, the fatigue which may be due to the screen time?
The main difference in an allergy is the intense itching. There might be redness and waterlogging in the eye. And if it's because of touch screens or any gadget, actually it disappears promptly with rest. But allergy will not disappear promptly with rest. So you need some medication if you have an allergy. So that's the main difference is the itching.
Okay. The redness?
The disappearance with rest.
The redness or?
Redness comes in both. There's redness in both. Watering is there in both. So that's not the real feature wherein you can. The main thing is the rest. The here on this side is the itch.
That's so nice. And is there any gadget where you can put it on the screen and can filter certain things which can rest your eyes?
Yeah, actually, this question pops up repeatedly in my clinic, but it's a myth. You cannot rest your eyes by putting in something in between the computer and the eye. All you need to do is give rest every 20 minutes.
Yeah. That's a great input. Dr. Ushi, I think there is a lot of issues around the learning patterns, the learning disorders, and even you can see that in between the power went off, so I had to go out to to be visible on the screen. But here, I would again come back to one thing where I feel that how to inculcate uh, the behaviors. Like one thing which is coming as an example to me, the COVID has taught one thing, like maybe a better civic behavior in public. People used to spit everywhere. People are now, they are all banded with their masks and everything. But otherwise, they have been wearing several masks over their face. There may be some improvement in certain areas, but there are still some gray areas to be concerned with. Can you highlight?
Gray areas concerned with? Rajeshwari, I didn't hear the last part. You broke out.
Yeah, so I
Gurvinder,
Yes.
can you hear me? I think Rajeshwari's connection is not very good.
that paradigm.
Yes.
Okay. So you want me to touch upon how to create better behavior, is it, Rajeshwari?
Yes, yes,
All right.
yes,
All right.
yes.
Now, it's very important because all behavior is modified. All behavior can be modified. Every behavior is created. You can positively reinforce it or you can negatively reinforce it. So a lot of it is dependent on somebody who's observing the behavior. In some cases, it's the parent, and in most cases, it is the teacher. It also is very age dependent. So in order for us to create more resilient children, as I would call it, because they become more tough to handle situations, they're much stronger when they fail to get up and pull themselves back into their own original shapes. They also are not pressured to perform and excel and things like this. Even if the parent forces them, they know what is the limit line and they know how to balance themselves. I would say, please let kids experience life. Many parents are overtly protective today. They kind of go crazy protecting children.
Yeah.
And forget the parent, even the child and the parent together. We live in a generation of instant gratification. They send them to a tutorial and they want immediate results. You want to prepare a child to enter IIT from the time it's born. You want a child to become a doctor just because you saw them playing with dolls and it's like wearing a white coat. Now, these are not reasons why you push kids. Half of the time, children exhibit behavior because they have been pushed. They have not been molded.
Yeah. So one thing here, I want to specifically get an answer from you. See, the houses may have limited gadgets. Say
Yes.
one TV, maybe two smartphones, or maybe even not a smartphone at all. I remember a girl committed suicide in Kerala who was a very topper girl, but she was not having the television or a smartphone. She committed suicide because she was feeling that she is being left behind in studies.
Yes.
And here, another concern, the other side of the coin is that the parents are also working from home. They also need the gadget at the same time that the schools may be online.
True.
So how to balance these things? Can there be a middle way out?
That's why I said shared screen hours. You cannot share screen hours continuously. Somebody cannot own the device. And that's the reason why I'm trying to tell you, you can always have a hotspot. You can use a small device like a phone in one area. You can use a computer in the other area. Today, it's very possible to create a small hotspot using your phone and ensure that the little child suffices with the phone. And in case you are ready to do with the phone, that is a smartphone, maybe you should adjust between the one or two devices that are present. Now, you talked about a girl who committed suicide because she didn't have enough, maybe a laptop or a television to watch whatever she needed to. Just today morning, before I came here, I said I was with a patient. I got a call from a student who was reprimanded for watching cartoons during these holidays. And the parents said that you're watching too much of cartoon on TV. Guess what the boy did? He ended his life. And people never expected that he's going to go and do this to himself. He used his mother's dupatta and went and hanged himself. He's just not even 14 years of age. Day before yesterday, I have a newspaper cutting which says that a 9 or a 10-year-old boy was not allowed to go to a wedding The parent preferred that he stayed back with the grandmother. He shut down the main door and jumped from the 17th floor balcony. Now, I cannot understand why a child would do this, because obviously it's been given everything that it's asked for. So when we are living in a generation full of fat people with slim TVs, one needs to be really, really careful. All right? It is the adult's responsibility, because what happens is the adult that watches and behaves and modifies behavior. You cannot blame a child alone. When it comes to the worst things, a spouse, if a child behaves nicely, they will say, oh, this guy is just like me. And if the child behaves badly, they say, oh my God, he's taken up after my spouse. So we ourselves have a tendency to do that. Yes or no? So I believe that at some point, if both the parents are great and friendly, they'll say, this guy has a lousy teacher. So they're not doing a good job. So at the end of the day, everyone bears the brunt of irresponsibility. Every single child is a good child, and all behavior can be modified. And no child will exhibit bad behavior. And even if it does exhibit bad behavior, we have a chance to remodel and go back and ensure that the child exhibits desired behavior. So it's a process, Rajeshwari. It's not a switch button where you can switch on and switch off. We need to watch out and reward good behavior, ignore bad behavior, and worse comes worse, maybe even punish with restricted discipline without touching the child, by using what I call positive reinforcement, by also trying to avoid negative reinforcement. So every time good behavior is rewarded, you're actually consolidating behavior. And every time negative behavior is called out, I think we don't have helplines, but I had a friend of mine who recently landed in one of the airports in India. And the first thing he did is turned around his 6-year-old and spanked him. And I asked him, why are you doing this? You know what he said? In America, they call the helpline. So we can't spank anybody there.
But here you can do it. Oh
here
my
you can do it. So, you know, even the parent is frustrated sometimes, because the kid also tries and manipulates the parents. So if the behavior is manipulative, it's completely circumstantial. And one must need to remove the circumstance or change the environment so that the behavior also changes. So it's all doable, but I would sum it up by saying rest, relax, and recharge. These three are completely a must. Not just work, 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 you know, all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Rest, relax, and recharge.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great, you know, insight. Here, you know, I would like a very quick from Dr. Manjari and Tulsi, that how can during online we can maintain the discipline. Dr. Manjari, first from you, and then Tulsi. Very, very quick ones.
Yeah, so I think one of the basic things that children respond very well to is a structured routine.
Manjari, not only children, everybody, those who are online.
Okay, so all of us, adults also respond very well to a structure. So what the COVID did, what the lockdown did, is break that structure that we had in place, like the children going to school, for us going to our offices. So, you know, getting up time, sleeping time, everything is gone for a toss. And that's the reason unpredictability, especially I'm talking with relation to kids, unpredictability, not knowing what to do after this leads to a lot of irritation. I think not only for children, but as adults also. I don't know what to do when I have the entire day. That can lead to irritation, which comes out in the form of, you know, anger, frustration on others. So I think having a flexible routine is necessary. It need not be as rigid as when we were not during the lockdown, but it has to be some kind of routine, and have this for the entire family. So, you know, have a routine where you get up at a particular time, do things as a family for this time, because I think this is one time that we've all got with our families, which we've never got before. So something that you do with your family, something that all of us do individually, because I think we're all used to this me time, especially adults. So now this has, you know, the lockdown and staying together 24/7 has taken away this me time for all of us. And for adults, this can get extremely frustrating. I mean, between parents also, it can happen that because I'm not getting my me time, I'm not getting that 1 hour to myself. So having some amount of me time is necessary for, like for adults, it's also necessary for children, where, you know, for 1 hour, they are not told what to do. Let them do what they want. I mean, it may not be screens, just let them do what they want. But structure your day. I think this is one of the basic things that we can do in lockdown that will help us to maintain our peace, our sanity. Second is talk, communicate. You're not feeling good. All of us are going through stress this time. And, the more bottled up we remain, I think it leads to heightened anxiety. So as you said, it's still taboo. I mean, talking to psychiatrists, going to a counselor, going to a psychiatrist is still a matter of taboo in our country, unfortunately. So you need not directly talk to a psychiatrist, talk to your family members. Express what your anxiety is about the future, about what you're facing right now. Talk about it. Share your experiences during the lockdown. And third, do not get too competitive. I've heard a lot of people saying, parents saying, I made sure that my child learned violin during this lockdown. I made sure that my child learned German during this lockdown. And you tell other parents, this can get very competitive. Every child has his own pace. Not every child may have made the best use of this lockdown. Some children may have. So let's not make this a competition. I mean, at the end of lockdown, we want to be stronger individuals, but it need not be necessary in terms of, measurable in terms of what we have gained during this lockdown, because all of us have our own pace. All of us have our own stories.
Yeah,
So
Dr. Manjari, I think I will
yeah,
go to
so, basically structure talking and giving every child and every adult their own pace. I think this is what we need to follow.
Great, great. Tulsi, very quick one from you, because I have some important questions coming up. Like, how do you see that, the discipline, how can you maintain during online learning?
See, discipline is not everything. So all the time, if we are going to insist on disciplining, maintaining discipline, the children are definitely, they are not, clockwork toys that they have to keep working in the same way. I feel it is how you engage the child that is important. What we felt was worked for us was that we had a class teacher time. Every day we had class teacher time, where the class teacher just chatted with the children. It was one 30-minute period where the class teacher just chatted with the children to put them into the right frame of mind. And the child, what did you do? Suppose there was a recipe that the child, nowadays you're having a lot of children trying out YouTube recipes and all. So what did you do? So how did you do it? How was it? So, sharing those things. What happened? How did you, so there are a lot of things that can engage you. Secondly, the class, as I said, teaching should change. It is not going to be the same old stuff. So it has to be, more experiential. Now, how much can you experience from a screen is the question you will ask me. But, if they show you how it is done, instead of just telling you how it is done, suppose there is a model that is being used. And then after that, let the children and the teacher discuss. So the class is actually divided into 3 parts. One is where you are sharing first. Secondly, you have your teaching. And third, you are actually discussing what has happened. So that is the way we felt that discipline was maintained in the class. And the children always had something to, always had something to, come up with the next day. So they were very excited about it. So the teacher always left the child with a little thing like, try this out. It could be a song, it could be a recipe, it could be something from the sciences, anything, something that they can do.
Yeah, so the engagement was the key. Quickly coming to Dr. Moti. Dr. Moti, you said that, you do something to sharpen the memory. So I really want that online learning. Do you have any quick tips for retaining the learning?
Yeah, exactly. There are many. If you just search for memory tips, you will get a lot of things in the YouTube. There's something called a flashcard. A flashcard is wherein you select a question and then you write the answer on that. You needn't necessarily write the whole answer. You write a concise, you concise the answer and write it on the flashcard, or you draw it diagrammatically and then you have it. So for every question, let's say you have 100 of such flashcards with you, you turn the card, the question is there, you repeat the answer. Yes, if you're able to answer, you keep it on a stack. And then the next day, you try the one which you have already done. If you're able to repeat the answer, you put it on the weekly group. So the daily group, and then the weekly group, and then the monthly group. So there's no unnecessary repeating the same questions again and again. So once it goes into the monthly group, at the end of the month, if you're able to remember that, then you're supposed to have got that to your long-term memory. You can keep doing that with until you get the exams done. So it's a daily, your weekly, and then a monthly. So you keep doing this actually you spend less time in studying the same topics again and again. That's one wonderful way of doing it. I've taught this to some of the children. And then there are other ways of remembering things, memory. Like the very common thing is mnemonics. The fact that memory does not happen in the brain in a single point or in a single place. If you associate some word to a visual theme or to a sound or to a touch, then what happens is the whole thing gets networked, and there is a possibility of that being there in the long-term memory is much more. So when you read something, you're supposed to connect it, something which is practical or similar sounding or similar meaning or something like that. So you write out your lessons like that, and then you take it to your long-term memory. Then there's no necessity to keep reading the same lessons again and again. So therein you reduce your screen time, you reduce time, you have more time for fun. So there are several such techniques going on there. You can go to YouTube and get them all.
Great. Dr. Modi, that was really helpful, how you can even any kind of learning that can have better memory techniques can be used to retain that learning. Well, there is a question from Shalu that how can you monitor the child while you stay away at work? I think that too much of monitoring is also not good. Let me answer that it is not very good to too much of monitoring. Trust is also important in your relationships when you are dealing with your children, whatever age they are within the family. The love, bond, trust has to be there. And remember, the self-disciplined role modeling has to be always there, where children can learn that there is something, a control element. I wanted to sum up the session, but I know it is already 6:51. And Gurvinder, is Dr. Nataraj Ray there?
Yes, he joined.
Okay, so Dr. Nataraj Ray is our national president, and I welcome him because despite his very busy and very tight, schedule, he could join us here. And sir, what is your take on our session today? I can't comment on that because you were busy, but still, I hope you could make some part of it.
Yeah. Good evening, good evening, my dear ISTD past president and NC member, chapter chairman, and I congratulate and all the compliments to Kuri and Daniel for arranging this wonderful session, and the moderation our own dear Dr. Rajeshwari Narandan. Here she has done all these things. She has done always very seriously and very politely and very honestly. So thank you, madam, for you doing this wonderful session. I have seen this is one of the best wonderful session you have done so far. So far I have seen it. All the speakers are very good and wonderful speakers. Hello.
Yeah, you're audible. You're
I'm audible, but my net is not working. Okay.
So it's working.
Hello.
It's working,
It's
sir.
working.
Working. So I couldn't see my photographs. Okay. So all the speakers are very very eloquent. All the details they have given, and the details I cannot speak because first 30-35 minutes I was not there. But rest of the things, what is the description is given by all the speakers is very helpful to the society and all the learners and also who have participated in the things today. Thank you, madam, and thank you all the best because this is a wonderful session ISTD has done and ISTD NHQ has done in this COVID session, because I feel that in the COVID session what and how our members will be activated. But I seen that this is the way to engage ourselves in the webinar, so that I have allowed to the national office, and we have purchased the Zoom account, and every day all the chapters across the country, 43, 44 chapters are doing this webinar, and all the members of the country are actively participating. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you for your wonderful
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
And thank you very much for wonderful moderation.
Thank you, Dada.
And thank you, Kurianji, for your wonderful organization of the 3 verticals. For one of the verticals, second, third, fourth verticals, and it is the first time ISTD has done this type of wonderful session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my participants, my stakeholders, my past presidents, President of Emeritus, NC member, chapter chairman, for enjoying this wonderful session, and also wonderful speakers. They have given their best inputs to ourselves, to ISTD, and we work together in future also. All the speakers are invited to work together in future also. Thank you very much.
Kurianji, your take quickly, very quickly, because we started on time. I don't want to lose the time. It is just only 5 minutes left to 7.
Yeah.
So very
We
quick.
all, we all accept knowledge is the only thing which can't be stolen or hacked. But we should select proper ways to achieve the same. Today's all the eminent speakers, their thought-provoking remarks warns us about how we should be careful while insisting our kids for e-learning. So friends, with this remark, I would thank all the participants, especially our eminent speakers. Dr. Ushi Mohandas, doctor and behavioral scientist, has explained the implications of e-learning to not only to the kids, but the family altogether, and how we can live with a close bonding ourselves. Let me thank Dr. Ushi on behalf of ISTD and all the participants. Ms. Tulsi Bhatia, being an educationist, has explained the challenges pertaining to teachers, students, and parents, and also the challenges to pursue learning in remote villages. Let me thank Ms. Tulsi on behalf of ISTD and all the participants. Dr. Moti Krupashankar, being ophthalmologist, explained to us about the ideal screen time for a child and implications and side effects of using more screen time and their remedies. Let me thank Dr. Moti on behalf of ISTD and all the participants. Dr. Manjari Deshpande Shanai, being a child psychiatrist, explained to us about the learning disorders and how to tackle the same by teachers and parents. Let me thank Dr. Manjari on behalf of ISTD and all the participants. Dr. Rajeshwari Narendran, our former national president, and moderated this webinar excellently well. Even though she is a family member of ISTD, I would like to thank Dr. Rajeshwari on behalf of you all. I would like to thank Dr. Nadaraj Ray, our national president, for his support and guidance. I would like to thank all President Emeritus, past presidents, NC members, and all participants for the support. I would like to mention special thanks to Mr. Gurvinder and all the NHQ staff for the support and assistance provided. Let us continue in learning, be safe, and stay care. Thank you.
Yeah, so from each one, I'm taking one learning. Ma'am Tulsi said, respect the teachers. They have really worked very hard. So a big clap for the teachers along with all the warriors of COVID. Dr. Ushi said, you monitor rest, relax, recharge. It is very, very important for all of us to stay calm, to be peaceful. Thank you, Dr. Ushi, for this. Dr. Manjari said that there may be, the screen times which are prescribed, and how to identify various syndromes and stressors and around us, and how can we take care of that. Dr. Moti, wonderful thing that you said, that 20 minutes relax, maybe some eye exercises here and there, and putting that fold back and taking all the precautions to care your eye, because if eye is there, rest everything matters. Definitely, yes, I believe that that was really very wonderful. And it was very good learning for me, and I thank everyone, the organizers, the ISTD, particularly Mr. Gurvinder, Dr. Ray, for believing and trusting in us, and all of my panelists, Dr. Moti, Dr. Manjari, Tulsi, and Dr. Ushi. From your busy schedules, hats off, you are my warriors, and you made a lot of difference today. Thank you so much.
I have one special thanks to Dr. Rajeshwari Narendran, our own Dr. Rajeshwari Narendran.
Thank you.
For doing you excellent moderation. Excellent moderation. Thank you, Rajeshwari ji, for with us, and in future also you will be with us for this type of program. I would request Kurian ji arrange for this type of program more and more.
Sure.
More and more. And I can tell you, the Kurian ji has done the highest webinar, and West is the highest webinar in last three months. Thank you.
When we started on 5, I want to finish at 7, because that is the time we have said, because I am a person, a timekeeper.
I know.
Thank you so much. Thank you.